Tonight at 7:19 p.m. Eastern, Senator Booker broke the record for the longest speech ever given by a United States senator. The previous record was set by arch segregationist Strom Thurmond, who tried to filibuster the Civil Rights Act in 1957. That speech lasted 24 hours and 18 minutes, but it included things like him reading from the encyclopedia and him taking a bathroom break. Senator Cory Booker did nothing like either of those things. Tonight, Senator Booker blew past Thurmond's record. He spoke until 8:04 p.m. for a total of 25 hours and 4 minutes.
Would the senator yield for a question?
Chuck Schumer, it's the only time in my life I can tell you no.
I just want to tell you a question. Do you know you have just broken the record? Do you know how proud this caucus is of you? Do you know how proud America is of you?
That was the moment when he broke the record, but that was not the end. He then kept going. The whole time, Senator Booker was not allowed to sit down or use the bathroom. He did get help from his Democratic colleagues who took turns overnight and all through the day today asking Senator Booker questions. That still did not mean Senator Booker could sit down, but it did mean that for the time they were asking their questions, he could stop talking for the length of time it took them to pose a question to him, whereupon it was time for him to start talking again. At the start of his speech at 7 p.m. last night, Senator Booker referenced the late Congressman John Lewis, civil rights icon, a mentor to many Democratic lawmakers, including Senator Booker. Congressman John Lewis famously advised getting into what he called good trouble. Senator Booker began his stand by saying that's what he intended to do. He began by saying he would disrupt the normal business of the Senate for as long as he was physically able, because he sincerely believed the country was in crisis. Senator Booker started last night. He talked all night. He was still at it when we woke up today, delivering on his promise to disrupt the status quo any way he could.
It's enough for me. 12 hours now I'm standing, and I'm still going strong because this president is wrong. And he's violating principles that we hold dear and principles in this document that are so clear and plain. The powers of the Article 1 branch are spelled out, and he is violating them. A Congress that is being too complicit to an executive that is overstepping his authority and violating the Constitution and hurting people who rely on health care and Social Security. When is it going to be enough? My voice is inadequate. My efforts today are inadequate to stop what they're trying to do. But we, the people, are powerful. We are strong. God bless America. We need you now. God bless America. If you love her, if you love your neighbor, if you love this country, show your love. Stop them from doing what they're trying to do for almost 20 hours. We have laid out what they're trying to do, 20 hours. I want to stand more, and I will, but I'm begging people, don't let this be another normal day in America. Please, God, don't let them take Medicaid away from 10, 20, 30, or 40 million Americans who desperately need it. Don't let them do it. This is our moral moment. This is when the most precious ideas of our country are being tested, where the Constitution, and the question is being called, where does the Constitution live? On paper or in our hearts? It is time to heed the words of the man I began this whole thing with, John Lewis. I beg folks to take his example of his early days, where he made himself determined to show his love for his country at a time the country didn't love him, to love this country so much, to be such a patriot that he endured beatings savagely on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, at lunch counters, on freedom rides. He said he had to do something. We need that now from all Americans. This is a moral moment. It's not left or right, it's right or wrong. Let's get in good trouble. My friend, Madam President, I yield the floor.
Joining us now for his first TV interview since his record-breaking speech in the Senate. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, the new record holder for the Senate's longest ever speech. Senator, how are you?
I'm definitely hurting a little bit, but I'm feeling strong in spirit and grateful to so many people who allowed me to tell their stories on the Senate floor and who were there for me, from the parliamentary staff to my colleagues. It was a long 25 hours, but I'm feeling a lot of gratitude.
Staying up 25 hours for any reason is a trying thing physically. What was different about the experience of it than what you anticipated? I mean, you stood by your fellow Senator Chris Murphy 9 years ago when he did 15 hours. He described that today as a solidarity or a sympathy filibuster, and that you stood with him during that time. So you've experienced some of the pain of this before, but A, you're 9 years older than you were then, and B, this was a lot longer. How was it different, and how much were you prepared for?
You know, I was grateful to Chris. He and I talked about it before, and I at the end tonight, I said, our balance sheet's not equal. I now owe you 10 more hours. I stood with him, and I really wanted to see if I could stand for as long as he and I were going to go. And he was successful that day in getting concessions from Mitch McConnell to have votes on the Senate floor around gun safety. Unfortunately, even common sense gun safety then failed. But for me, it was an experience that stuck in my mind. I could do 15 hours without going to the bathroom, even though my legs really hurt over those 15 hours. Both of us talked about how our feet hurt. And so when my team and I decided to do this, we just said, let's take some risks. Let's go out there and see how long we could last. And to be candid, Strom Thurmond's record always kind of just really irked me, that he would be the longest speech, that the longest speech on our great Senate floor was someone who was trying to stop people like me from being in the Senate. So to surpass that was something I didn't know if we could do, but it was something that was really, as we got closer, became more and more important to me.
You used that phrase, take risks. You said repeatedly over the course of this filibuster, this speech, that you're motivated to do this by your constituents essentially challenging you to come up with something, to do something more than you thought you comfortably could do. Can you tell us a little bit about the decision-making process that you went through about deciding to do this? Obviously, you kind of kept it under wraps. You prepared with your staff, but nobody publicly knew you were going to do this until you started it.
No, I do really credit constituents who are impatient, who are demanding, who are scared, who are angry, and very understandably taking that anger out on Democrats who have to take some responsibility for being where we are in American history right now. And so the more I thought about it with my team, especially after the decisions we made revolving around the continuing resolution, I've been working so hard with my colleagues, trying to get them to engage in social media, put more of their heart and spirit out there. They're doing an amazing job. They've almost quadrupled their numbers of engagement online. I've got colleagues opening up TikTok accounts, but I suddenly realized that I've just got to do something myself. I've got to, try to prove worthy for my constituents that I'm willing to step out and step up in some way, and hopefully be able to share their stories that were so hurtful, and to read from my staff, people rendering their most personal stories about their fears or what's happening to their families. And so my staff and I said, let's try to bring those voices to the Senate floor. Let's see how long you can last. They're demanding something different. This certainly will be different. And I think that a lot of that energy from the folks that I've been seeing in Jersey and across this country really helped carry me through.
I don't know if you are conscious of how much this caught the attention and caught the imagination of the American people. I know that you're not using electronic devices on the Senate floor. You're not watching your TikTok numbers and your YouTube numbers and the C-SPAN contemporaneous viewing numbers while you're there, because you can't be. But every time that I checked any form of media by which you could be live monitored, there were no less than tens of thousands of people watching in the same place that I was in that moment. What you've done with everything else that's going on with this administration and the horrific cuts of 10,000 people fired today from the nation's health agencies and all these other things. This is the biggest story in the country right now. You have captured people's attention for 25 hours. And I'm wondering, For people who were moved by what you did, either among your Senate colleagues or just people who watched you from home, what do you hope they might do differently if they're moved by you and they feel the same sort of spirit that caused you to do what you did?
Well, I hope that we're all served to be ignition points for each other. My constituents, the letters, the calls, the demands were definitely an ignition point for me, but we've got to continue to ignite this movement. The only thing that stopped Donald Trump from tearing away the Affordable Care Act was the engagement of tens of thousands of Americans who didn't think they would become little lobbyists or activists or come down to the Capitol or protest in their communities. You know, Rachel, you and I have known each other a long time, and I've been listening to your show more regularly. I'm so grateful that you're doing this first 100 days. And I love how you start every show by showing what other Americans are doing. They're not waiting for us in Congress to lead. They've decided to take matters into their own hands and do something different. Those people were demanding to me to catch up, to try to do like they're doing. This is really about folks leading from their hearts and deciding I'm not going to just let business as usual go on in my life. And so I'm hoping that this is one part of a larger effort that tries to stop them from doing what they're about to do later this week or next week. I have not, I've sort of stepped out, I checked out for this 24 hours, but they're going to try to push through a bill that's going to gut $880 billion from Medicaid. They're going to try to put forward to a bill that's going to give tax cuts to the wealthiest in our country, disproportionately trillions of dollars, and all that, and they're going to still blow one of the biggest single president deficits into our national economy, into our national debt. It's outrageous. And we have got to try to stop them in the same way that the people of this country were able to get good conscious Republicans, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, John McCain, to change their votes and stop him from doing it. Well, we need to move 3 members in the House, I think, and 4 members in the Senate, and all of us have to be a part of that. We can't sit back and do nothing.
I'm listening to you and I hear you, but I'm also outside my body a little bit, marveling at your cogency right now. I know that, I don't know if you know that you are still making sense, but you're still making sense and your sentences are still properly structured, and it's starting to feel like a superhuman thing. I'm mindful of how much of your additional energy I'm taking right now. Am I right that you wear one of those rings that monitors your vitals?
I do. My staff was telling me we had to look at what it says. So I opened it up, and it gave me nothing on a sleep score because I didn't. My heart rate was pretty damn high after about 4 or 5 hours, a little bit high. That's concerning. So there are definitely some physical things. I'm feeling it now, and it's the first time I ever did an interview with you where I got to sit down, and there's a man here I've known for years, and he's just, I almost kissed him when he gave me this seat to sit down. So I'm grateful.
Well, Senator, as I said, what you have done has captured the nation's attention, and I think captured the moral imagination of this nation in a way that you were really demanding with what you did. And so I don't know what the outcome's going to be. You never know what the outcome's going to be of these things. I do know that if you don't do it, nothing's going to happen. Exactly. And so I wish you rest, and I think you should get checked out by a doctor, and I think you should hydrate, and I hope you get people to leave you alone for the next few hours.
Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Joining us now is House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. There is so much to talk about. Let's begin, as we wait for a victory speech in Wisconsin, with your reaction to what you're seeing in those special elections in Florida for 2 House seats.
Well, good evening, Lawrence. Great to be with you. It was an incredible overperformance by the 2 Democratic candidates in 2 ruby red districts. Florida 1, which Donald Trump won by 37 points, and Florida 6, where Josh Weil ran a great campaign in a district that Donald Trump had just won by 30 points. And what we're seeing, of course, is something that we've seen all across the country since the early special elections that began in late January. And that is Democratic energy and overperformance, coupled with independent swing voters and even moderate Republicans breaking for the Democratic candidate and rejecting the extremism, the outrageous behavior of this administration and their effort to harm everyday Americans.
As you look at the Wisconsin result, this was something I did not expect to be discussing with you during this hour tonight. We expected this to be a closer race. We expected the call to come much later in the evening. We saw Elon Musk personally go out there. We saw him hand million-dollar checks to voters, trying to literally buy the election right there in Wisconsin. What does it tell Republican members of the House of Representatives who are counting on Elon Musk to get them reelected?
It's time for them to walk away from this unelected, unpopular, unhinged, and un-American billionaire puppet master. Elon Musk was just rejected decisively by the voters of Wisconsin. He tried to spend his unlimited resources to buy a state Supreme Court seat in Wisconsin, and it failed spectacularly. The voters rejected Donald Trump, they rejected Elon Musk, and they rejected the rapidly deteriorating Republican brand. We have to continue as Democrats to make it clear to everyday Americans that we are fighting to build an affordable economy and to drive down the high cost of living, while at the same time pushing back against Republican extremism and their efforts to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, cut Medicaid, and undermine our democracy and the American way of life. Clearly, the American people are with us as it relates to what they are seeing in Washington, D.C., and we've now seen this in special elections in January, in February, in March, just recently in Pennsylvania, and now, of course, decisively in April in Wisconsin.
I want to ask you about what feels like a related event, especially at this hour, a related event to what voters are saying in these elections tonight. And that is what happened in the United States Senate today. And I worked in the Senate for many years, 7 or 8 years. And I can say that the Democratic leader of the House of Representatives never once set foot in the Senate chamber when I was there. All House members, of course, as we know, have floor privileges in the Senate. They can come in whenever they want to. It was extremely rare to see a House member there. You were there today. Why did you decide to go there today, and what did it feel like to witness what turned out to be the history that Senator Cory Booker made in the Senate chamber today?
It was a very powerful experience. I had the opportunity to visit the Senate chamber twice. Initially, earlier in the day, just to express my support and solidarity for Cory, who I've known a long time. We got started in politics around the same period of time, him in Newark, New Jersey, and myself across the river in Brooklyn, New York. We were in law school around the same time, and I've long admired him. But today was really Senator Cory Booker taking it to the next level on behalf of the American people, and indeed, I would argue, Lawrence, the free world. And so it was powerful to be on the Senate floor with him earlier today. But then when it became clear that he had a chance to break Strom Thurmond's record, I decided to change my schedule so I could be back on the Senate floor to witness that history. Because here you have this incredible juxtaposition of Strom Thurmond having previously delivered the longest speech in Senate history in defense of Jim Crow and racial oppression, and Cory Booker, an African-American man, defending democracy and the American way of life in the face of Trump's extremism. Breaking that record was just powerful to witness. And, you know, Senator Booker's speech was strong, it was substantive, but perhaps what was most touching about it was that it was soulful, it was authentic, it came from his heart. Of course, the brilliance of his mind, but it came from his heart.
Yeah, it was the most fully authentic Cory Booker that I've ever seen. And I think there's something about that 25 hours that wears a person down. And he was standing out there with no defenses that you might bring to other sort of public speaking events. And it was really an astonishing thing to watch. One of the things he was concentrating on, and one of the things that he was getting in all of the emails that were being sent to him from around the country, was fear of what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are going to do to Social Security. And that is a fear that is as powerful as a voter could have in terms of an attachment to an important public program, the most popular public program in American governing history. I got to think, even when you get to judicial elections in Wisconsin, if people are afraid of what's going to happen to Social Security, they're not going to be voting for the side that's trying to knock it down.
That's absolutely correct. And this is an area where there's a clear distinction between what Democrats are all about and Republicans. We want to protect and strengthen Social Security. It's an earned benefit. The American people have paid into Social Security throughout their entire working life. And the nerve of these Republicans, led by Donald Trump and Elon Musk, who want to take a chainsaw to Social Security, the most important anti-poverty program for older Americans ever invented, which also happens to be this earned benefit. And why do they want to decimate Social Security? Because they want to actually give massive tax cuts to their billionaire donors, people like Elon Musk. And so I thought what Senator Booker did today was incredibly powerful in speaking to this issue. And as you know, Lawrence, in the House, we had a Democratic-led hearing on Social Security, the threats that it is under, and our commitment as Democrats to protect it.
And you did. I watched some of that hearing, and you did something at that hearing. I know you were present at the hearing that Republicans would never do. You actually listened to Social Security recipients and people whose lives could not work without their Social Security check. There was a woman who testified. I saw her testify saying her Social Security check is $1,500 a month. $1,500 a month, and without that, she would be homeless. And the stakes identified by the actual beneficiaries in that hearing were as clear and as powerful as you could ask for.
That's absolutely right. It's one thing to say, and it is in fact true, that there are a little over 70 million people who rely on Social Security as a major source of income, half of whom live by themselves here in the United States of America. But when you actually hear from people whose very life will be impacted and shortchanged, possibly just cut short in terms of their ability to live with the dignity and respect that every American deserves, is very powerful. Republicans have no interest in these Americans telling their stories, which is why, as House Democrats, we will continue week after week to hold hearings. This is the third in a series of hearings that we've held. Initially, it was on Medicaid last week. We had a hearing on nutritional assistance and the fact that Republicans are literally trying to rip food out of the mouths of babies and children in this country. Today, Social Security, and we're going to continue to stay on this case.
I mean, on the subject of Social Security, I would have to think that it was a factor in the results we're seeing in those congressional races, those House races in Florida tonight.
There's no doubt about it. You know, Elon Musk was also very involved in these Florida races, and notwithstanding the fact that these are safe Republican districts, the results that we have seen can be interpreted, we believe, as a rejection of him and his extremism as well. This is somebody who has said he wants to take a chainsaw to Social Security, and he's called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. It's not a Ponzi scheme, Elon. He's a living, breathing Ponzi scheme. Project 2025 is a Ponzi scheme. And that's what the voters clearly believe increasingly all across the country. One point, Lawrence, that should have my Republican colleagues quaking in their boots. In the Florida 6 race, which was a Trump plus 30 district, where the margin was cut in half, and we'll see where it ultimately lands, but we know at minimum it was cut in half to around 15 or 16 points. There are 60 Republicans in the House of Representatives who currently represent districts where Trump did worse than 15 or 16 points. And every single one of those districts, there's now a target on the backs of those House Republicans.
House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries, thank you very much for joining us on this important night. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you.
Claire McCaskill is a former Democratic senator from Missouri. Fernando Mondi is a veteran Democratic pollster and strategist who hails from Florida, and they both join me now. Fernando, let me go to you first. We're getting some results from that other contested race in Florida 1 as that comes in, because those polls closed an hour later. Your read on what we were just hearing about the sort of mood inside the Josh Weil party there and their understanding of what kind of the hill they were trying to climb is and what tonight's results might mean.
Chris, I think we can define it already, even waiting for the results in the District 1 race with two words: game on. These are very bad numbers for the Trump administration, certainly, because, look, even those of us in Florida, we never really expected either of these seats to be won. But the fact that plus 30 seats, deep ruby red Republican seats, have had a 20-point shift, or in some cases we're seeing in the other race right now, it's virtually tied. What does that project for the rest of the country? Wherever else there's going to be a close election or an election that was decided by 4 or 5 points, you've got to be deeply concerned if you're the Republican Party right now looking at these numbers, especially given that this is still supposed to be the honeymoon, Trump at the apex of his powers. We're seeing anything but that. If I could just make one other quick point.
Yep.
I think Cory Booker doing that tonight as well, not just historic. I'm going to make a prediction on this broadcast, Chris. We saw the record set tonight for the longest Senate floor speech. You're going to see that record broken several times over the next couple of years. There's 46 other Democratic senators. Cory Booker has broken the seal. Now the endurance test challenge is going to go to all the other ones because they have finally found their voice. And the voice is resist. Do not let the fascist regime, which unfortunately is the path that the Trump administration is clearly showing they're taking in these first 2 months, win. And they have to stand up and inspire, because certainly a huge segment of the American voters feel that way. We're seeing that in Florida 6 and in Florida 1 tonight.
Fernando, let me just say, we have that call there for Randy Fine over Josh Weil right now. That's about 11 points with 91% in. And in that other race in Congressional District 1, if I can do my Timu brand Steve Kornacki here, that's right now, that's looking like a, that's a 6-point race. We should note that we got 50% of the vote in right away. That was probably the early vote. That tends to swing more Democratic. It's clearly moving towards the Republicans as it goes in. But still, that's a 6-point race with 75% in, okay? Again, Gaetz won against this exact same candidate, Gabe Valamont, just in November by 30-plus points. So, Claire, we still got Wisconsin tonight. The most interesting moments happened to me in the last week was what the announcement about Stefanik last week, when they said, sorry, Congresswoman, we know this is your life's goal. We know that you're quite literally probably measuring the drapes for the penthouse in the sky across from the UN. But I got bad news for you. We need you in there. Hold on one second. We do have a call there in that other district. Jimmy Patronis is projected to be the winner in Florida House Special 1. That's a Republican who's running in that seat to replace a guy by the name of Matt Gaetz. He is projected to win again with 74% of the vote in, up 6 points in a district that Gaetz carried against this very same Democrat just 3 or 4 months ago by a 30-point margin. So we're looking at, as of now, a 24-point swing or something like that towards Democrats. Now, again, much lower turnout. It's probably going to be roughly about half of the turnout we saw in November when all is said and done. But clear to this point, everyone can read these numbers. And if you just say, look, 20-point swing in a special, that Stefanik seat, which is a safe seat, is all of a sudden essentially a toss-up. And that decision they made last week is both looking pretty smart, but also that they understand there's something afoot here.
Yeah. And by the way, it showed weakness. And we all know how Trump loves to show weakness. You know, basically saying, I can't win her district. She has to stay in her job is a huge admission from Donald Trump. You know, and I think what's happening tonight, and by the way, Chris, I want to say that my sources on the Hill and that know people in the White House, part of them are kind of hoping that Musk crashes tonight. If Musk crashes tonight, it slows him down. And to say that there is a lot of nervousness among Republicans on Capitol Hill about Elon Musk is an understatement. They know he is not popular. They know he's less popular than Donald Trump. And you've already done a good job of explaining that Trump's numbers are not one that any new president should be proud of. So it really is. I think tonight, Wisconsin is really an inflection point. If the Democratic candidate for the Supreme Court wins there, I think you're going to have some Republicans on Capitol Hill. They're going to be relieved. And it'll be interesting to see how Donald Trump handles Elon Musk.
That's a really interesting point on that Musk. It's perplexing because he's such a compelling, charismatic, gripping figure. I just find him so just sort of relentlessly likable in public. It's just weird that it hasn't sort of worn that well. There's some interesting polling, Claire, to your point. I mean, all this stuff benchmarks off the top of the ticket, right? There's local issues in Wisconsin, particularly. There's lots of local issues. That court is going to decide whether a sort of defrosted caveman law on abortion is going to come back to life or not. But for now, I mean, we've got new AP polling on Trump's approval today. He's minus 14. Like, it's 42% approved, 56% disapprove. He's got bad numbers on the economy and stuff. Again, we're early here, but they have been trying to pull off this kind of psych job. Resistance is futile. And it does seem to me that tonight might be a little bit of an inflection point to what Claire was saying about how effective that psych job is.
Well, you know, remember, they like to invent the reality-based world that they live in between their ears, and that crashes against election results, as we're seeing tonight. And certainly the other metric for that, as you alluded to, Chris, is approval rating. Donald Trump has the lowest approval rating of any president since modern polling started at this early point in his administration. And I think Claire also mentioned as well, their brand has always been strength. Well, we're seeing anything but strength. We're seeing weakness tonight, and we're also seeing that the resistance is alive and well. And I think you're going to see the same flow of dollars to other races and others campaigns set off by the stampede tonight. I think tonight is the night that Democrats and the coalition that is now anti-Trump has found its voice. It's going to be an interesting now 2 months and 2 years ahead before the midterms.
Come on the air with the breaking news about Team Trump's reckless disregard for U.S. national security. According to documents reviewed by the Washington Post, as well as interviews with 3 U.S. officials, White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has done it again. He and members of the National Security Council have, quote, conducted government business over personal Gmail accounts, end quote. Washington Post reporting this, quote, a senior Waltz aide used the commercial email service for highly technical conversations with colleagues at other government agencies, including sensitive military positions and powerful weapon systems relating to an ongoing conflict. That is according to emails that were reviewed by the Washington Post. Waltz has had less sensitive but potentially exploitable information sent to his Gmail, such as his schedule and other work documents. The Trump administration is pushing back against the Washington Post report, and a spokesperson for the National Security Council saying that he has not seen Mike Waltz use his Gmail that way, adding, quote, Waltz didn't and wouldn't send classified information on an open account. That is not what the Washington Post reports. It's not the question or even the point. Experts telling the Washington Post that Waltz's use of Gmail makes him an incredibly vulnerable and high-value target for foreign actors, people like spies, saying that Gmail is far less secure than even a messaging app like Signal, which was, as we all know now, used by practically every single member, including the Vice President of the United States, of Donald Trump's top national security apparatus. They use Signal to have very sensitive conversations about an imminent military strike. Wall Street Journal also reported over the weekend that Mike Waltz had multiple other Signal chat groups going, not just about the Houthis, but about Russia and other topics. This breaking news on the use of Gmail to discuss government business by national security officials in the Trump administration is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former acting assistant attorney general for national security at the Justice Department, now an MSNBC legal analyst, Mary McCord is here. With me at the table, New York Times investigative reporter and MSNBC national security contributor Mike Schmidt is here. Also joining us, MSNBC legal analyst and former SDNY Criminal Division Deputy Chief Christy Greenberg is here. Mary McCord, your first thoughts.
Well, we were floored to learn that some of the top national security officials were using Signal to discuss detailed plans about an attack on the Houthis. But Signal, at least, is end-to-end encrypted. It is certainly not an approved communications application for classified information, but it's more secure than Gmail. So it's pretty shocking to see that not only would the carelessness in protecting sensitive information extend not only to using an unsafe and unsecure platform like Signal, but to one that is even less secure and less safe than Gmail. I recognize that there is pushback that anything classified was actually communicated on Gmail, but some of the things that you just described from that Washington Post story do sound very much like things that in my term in government would have been classified. And even if not classified national defense information, like the information that was in the Signal chats about the attack on the Houthis, which put aside for a second that the department or that the government is claiming that was not classified. I don't buy that. But even assuming nothing of that same level of sensitivity was on Gmail, it is not an approved communications platform for government employees doing official government business. And that is not only because of security issues, even things far less secret than our classified national defense information are still sensitive, still something that we don't want adversaries, both foreign and domestic, to be getting a hold of or breaking into. It's also not an approved mechanism for maintaining federal records. I mean, one reason you need to use your government email when you're communicating about official business with other government employees or even with outside government employees is so there would be a record of those emails for purposes of the Federal Records Act. Excuse me. So that's another problem with the use of Gmail here.
So, Mary, I want to ask you to sort of travel back in time when Trump cabinet officials were treated like mere mortals, right? When they were not free from scrutiny by the Department of Justice. I want to get into Mike Waltz's credibility, because the Washington Post includes this episode about Mike Waltz, because I think we're going to have a furious attack on the reporting, right? And I think that'll be the shiny object. But I just want to put into the record right now, before we go any further, what we've learned about Mike Waltz's credibility in this situation. Here's what he told Fox News, quote, Waltz, who added Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic to the Signal chat, told Fox News, quote, I take full responsibility. I built the group. But he has subsequently said Goldberg's contact information was, quote, sucked into his phone somehow. And he's never met or talked to the journalist, despite a newly circulated photo of the two men near each other at an event at the French ambassador's residence in Washington. Just as how Jeffrey Goldberg, the journalist, responded, quote, he's telling everyone he's never met me or spoken to me. That's simply not true. Goldberg told Meet the Press on Sunday. Quote, this isn't the Matrix. Phone numbers don't just get sucked into other phones. So we'll use the L word here. He's lying. Those are lies. And now there's a new report from the Washington Post, not saying that he sent classified information over his Gmail, but that he and his staff were using Gmail to communicate serious, technical, and detailed government information. I want to come back to a point you seem to make almost in passing, that this violates the Records Act. Just zoom in as though these were normal people in a normal administration where accountability and a Justice Department that was still independent and singularly focused on U.S. national security. What would that look like?
Well, so you would see a couple of things going on here. I mean, the National Archives, for one, outside of even in the Department of Justice, would be concerned about using, again, an application that doesn't result in the records being retained under the Federal Records Act. I mean, Congress passed that statute to make sure that all federal records would be maintained so that we have a historical record of things. And it's not just so that they can be FOIA'd under Public, Records Act requests by people to try to gain access to government communications, but for all kinds of purposes that the government needs throughout history to kind of be able to look back institutionally about how did previous administrations approach different things, et cetera. So you would expect the National Archivist to be concerned about that. You would expect the intelligence community, including the FBI and NSA, CIA, ODNI, I'm sorry for the menu here of acronyms, but you would expect our intelligence community to want to drill down on just how sensitive were the communications. Was anything there classified? Do they need to worry about harm to any of our allies, repairing any relationships with allies if potentially things could have been that they shared with us could have been vulnerable to being overheard or deliberately surveilled by our adversaries. They'd want to look into that carefully. Again, what we're seeing here is one newspaper article about what kinds of things those Gmail was used for, but there could be many more things, right? So they would want to look into that. And if in combination with the Signal chats, you would ordinarily think that there would be an investigation to determine whether there should be some sort of criminal or at least civil or administrative liability here. There's a whole sort of hierarchy of penalties for transmitting sensitive information over non-approved means, and that could be losing certain privileges like security clearances, for example, being reassigned to different jobs, suspension, other forms of discipline, all the way up to criminal prosecution if, of course, we're talking about the mishandling of classified information or some of these other types of things. So, normally this is something that should be investigated. It might even, honestly, at the point where we're talking about these now multiple examples, be something that inspector generals would want to look at because they'd want to see, is this a bigger and more systemic problem that needs, to be reported on? Now, we don't have an inspector general for the National Security Advisor, but you do for other departments and agencies that the National Security Advisor communicates with. So I think you would normally see, one passing, use of Gmail for something that's non-substantive, maybe, hey, I'm trying to reach you. When are you going to be around? Are you on vacation? Something like that. Those things would be overlooked. But this sounds like it was used, at least based on this reporting, for much more sort of regular use. And it also makes you wonder, Nicole, why are you using that? I mean, when I was in government, right, I had my personal phone with my personal Gmail, and I had my government-issued phone with my government email. Both went with me everywhere, but I did not confuse them, right? When I was doing official business outside of the office and in a not classified communications, I would use my government email on my government phone. I am certain that Mike Waltz has a government phone, and there's no reason for your personal email to even be on that phone. So it does make you wonder why. It's not like it's easier to use Gmail than your government email, and so why use it at all?